and welcome to The Insider, a show designed to clue you into the biggest news, events and announcements inside the video games industry, discussing with you some things you may know, some things you may not, and the glue that holds it all together is a little bit of my own opinion. My name is Paul James, thank you very much for watching, and let's go for the episode. So it seems like every man and his dog has had an opportunity to talk about this whole Diablo Immortal situation and what happened at BlizzCon just a couple of weeks ago. I wanted to pump the brakes, personally, because I knew that there was quite a bit of news still to come about this whole situation, and it finally has this week. So what we're going to talk about in this week's episode of The Insider is what happened, what's most recently occurred, and what that all means going forward. So let's get into it. So let's rewind a little bit first. Let's go back to BlizzCon and talk about what actually occurred. So firstly, Blizzard stuffed up. They had the announcement of Diablo Immortal. They didn't have an announcement for Diablo IV, which is what fans had really been hoping for. They constructed a poorly executed conference that concluded with the announcement of Diablo IV, just when fever pitch was essentially arriving with the fans, where they were expecting that big Diablo IV moment, and then they gave them a mobile game which could still be fantastic for what it is, but it's not what fans were looking for. After giving people a Warcraft remaster, Overwatch content, and a whole bunch of other awesome things, this should have been the sealer on the whole event, and instead it really deflated the whole community that was there, those online, and several others. The fan response was horrific. Fans, I think, in my opinion, are justified in being disappointed in that decision, as much as I think, again, Immortal could be a fairly solid game for what it is. Very different, but solid for what it is. But the response was still poor nonetheless. That moron that got out there on stage, speaking to developers from Blizzard and saying, hey, is this an off-season April Fool's joke? You're a tool. Shut up and go back under whatever rock you are hiding under. You've got no reason at any point to speak to these people in such a way. Yes, they might have made a mistake. Yes, it's not what you wanted, but you can show a little bit of respect. In all directions, things were not really planned out and executed and presented all that well. So now the mess needs to be cleaned up, and some news has emerged this week that begins to clear things up a little bit.
Hey, just was wondering, is this an out-of-season April Fool's joke?
So this week, some new news has emerged courtesy of Kotaku's Jason Schreier, and it relates to Diablo 3, Diablo 4, and Diablo Immortal. But let's begin with Diablo 3. That's the oldest of all these products, of course. Diablo 3 launched 2012. We saw the Reaper of Souls expansion and the console ports for the game about 12 months later. And it turns out that there was actually a second major expansion, like Reaper of Souls, planned as well. But it got killed. And the presumption is around that, based on the interviews that he conducted, that essentially Activision, Blizzard, they were happy with where the game was, courtesy of Reaper of Souls. There'd been mistakes made, and it was a chance to wipe the slate clean and move on. So we've already seen one cancellation when it comes to Diablo products. The whole idea was to then move on to Diablo 4, again, wiping the slate clean, and coming at things anew. Keep in mind how successful Diablo 3, specifically the Reaper of Souls version, has been, but they still were keen to wipe slate clean and move on. So then from there, Diablo 4 started development. And it made it a substantial way before the product in its form was cancelled. Clearly not meeting some standards that Blizzard had set internally. The project got axed. Apparently there were some Dark Souls influences, and it just wasn't quite working in the end for what they were looking to achieve. So there's a new version of the game that's in development at the moment, and it seems to be going all quite well from all reports. But on the side, you had some developers who were really quite burnt out after years and years of work on Diablo 3, and then getting it to where it needed to be after the store situation and several other problems that were inherent with the original version of the game. They were looking to clean these things up. They were tired as a result once they did, and they looked to try and do something different. Now they were still working on a Diablo game, they just worked on Diablo Immortal, alongside NetEase, the Chinese developer that's essentially the source of the problem here when it comes to a lot of fans. People saying that, like, they've seen their work, they're not a fan, they don't want anything to do with that sort of product. And I can understand that, they don't have the best reputation in the world, but the game is being overseen by Blizzard developers, so surely it's still going to be okay as a result. What we've also learned, courtesy of the interviews that Schreier conducted, is that Diablo IV is a fair way along the way, and that we actually nearly saw it at BlizzCon. There was apparently a video planned that was going to introduce it. Nothing big and glorious, but there was a video that was going to introduce the game and say, hey, we've got a new PC core Diablo game coming. Look forward to it. There was also some periods of development where at some point it looked like we were going to see some gameplay this year. So not just a formal title review, but some actual gameplay. And as is the case in game development, things change and there's always movement and there's ups and downs, and clearly that didn't happen. But the news is that there's a Diablo IV game coming, so let's take a breath. There's plenty of good things still to come with this franchise, and in the next segment I'm going to talk about what my expectations are for the franchise going forward based on all this news that we've now compiled. Let's start by talking about Diablo Immortal. Firstly, the game is going to be fine. It's not necessarily going to be the core Diablo that you want, and it's very hard to translate what you get in your core PC console versions of Diablo into a game that works on a mobile phone. But I'm sure for what the platform is capable of, it's still going to be a very solid game. Questions remain about how it's monetized, because that has been a big sticking point when it comes to NetEase over the journey. But that remains to be seen, of course. But the game itself is being overseen by Diablo, and specifically Blizzard, I guess, higher ups that have been there and they've done it, and they have high expectations. And even a considered weaker team such as NetEase will be raised and elevated and improved for the influence that those people have. So don't stress too much, and if it turns out it's no good, well, whatever, it's not a core Diablo game anyway. Moving on to that core game, given the fact that at some point in time we were going to see a formal announcement of the game this year, and again potentially some gameplay, that still suggests that the game, in whatever shape it's in, is still a fair way down the pipeline. And it gives me reason to think that maybe in 2019, maybe even as early as the Game Awards 2018, because of what's occurred, but most likely in 2019, that we're going to see an announcement for the next core Diablo game. With then an assumption, and look, this probably depends on whether the game is PC only, coming to console as well, whatever that kind of situation ends up looking like. 2020 maybe? 2021 maybe at the latest? But my money's on 2020. That's still a good 18 months from now, anywhere within an 18 to 24 month span from this period. It's not unreasonable to assume we might be seeing the game within that period, and that's not so bad. I know we've waited a long time for this, we waited a long time for Diablo 3, so let's cool our jets, let's be patient. Let's wait until Blizzard comes out and delivers the product that we know they're capable of. So that concludes another episode of The Insider. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider liking, sharing and subscribing. All those buttons are down below here. And hit that notification bell. That way you're alerted to every new video the moment it goes live on the channel. That includes Patch, The Insider, Player 2 Plays, the Late Game Review, Gamer School, and a whole bunch more. There is some awesome content there, so please be sure to go and check it out. Also visit the website, player2.net.au, where you'll find reviews, previews, opinion pieces, news, features, the Player 2 Writer's Draft, links to our podcasts, the Player 2 podcast, and Dev Diary, my own show. Please go and check that one out, I'm trying to build it up. And a whole lot more. There's some awesome content there being contributed by some of the best talent in Australia, so go and check out their work. We're also on Patreon, patreon.com/player2au, and consider kicking in a few dollars. At the lower tiers, you'll get early access to episodes of this and Patched and several other shows, At the higher tiers, you get monthly episode exclusives and the ability to join us in the monthly Player 2 podcast. You'll be helping the Player 2 dream to grow, so thank you in advance for your support. For rolling updates, you can find me at Paul James Games on Twitter, the website you'll find at Player2AU, and until next time, that is this whole Diablo situation wrapped up, for now at least. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.